Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome. Although today there is there are rains forecast through this evening and tomorrow, but warm welcome to all of you to World Tourism Day, where it was actually yesterday, 27th of September. But we are celebrating it today. The theme for World Tourism Day this year is tourism for inclusive growth, which is an important theme of tourism at any point of time, but it has a special resonance this year in a world ravaged by the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope you and your dear ones are all safe and well. It's a great privilege and an honor to have with us here tonight as a speaker, Dr. Venu Vasudevan, who happens to be an old friend and colleague. And he currently serves the government of Kerala as the Principal Secretary of Tourism. Kerala is widely described as God's own country, and not least because its tourism is very, very dynamic. We all know, especially in Bengal, we talk about the Kerala model all the time, and tourism is one of the sectors in which they are really the model of India. And we have, it's a proud privilege for us to have the person who is the most dynamic force in that dynamic sector of Kerala tourism. But in addition to tourism, Dr. Vasudevan also looks after 3 more departments, including culture and education. He earned a degree in medicine, but later chose to take up a career in the civil services. Dr. Vasudevan is the longest serving officer in tourism in India. He joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1990 and has served the government of India and the state government of Kerala in a wide range of capacities. He has served the sectors of tourism and culture in a variety of assignments. It was during his tenure as Director, Kerala Tourism, and later as Secretary of the Department of Tourism, that Kerala transformed its market positioning and built up a strong public-private partnership, culminating in Kerala being recognized by the National Geographic Traveler as one of the 50 must-see destinations of the world. Kerala Travel Mart, the biggest international travel mart in India, is Dr. Vasudevan's brainchild. He also played a pivotal role in formulating the Incredible India campaign of the Ministry of Tourism in the government of India. 2 projects designed by him have won international awards instituted by the Pacific Asia Travel Association. The first of these, called A Day with the Masters, which was a guided tour of Kerala Kalamandalam, a school for performing arts, won an honorable mention in the Pacific Asia Travel Association Awards scheme in 2005. And then Utsavam, which was a project to revive the traditional art forms of Kerala and to provide income streams to artists, won the Pata Gold Award in 2008. He served as Secretary Cultural Affairs in the government of Kerala from 2007 to 2011, during which period the famed International Theatre Festival of Kerala was established. He was instrumental in setting up and curating a new museum called Kerala, and he played a key role in the improvement and upgradation of the museums and archives of that state. Then he moved to the Union government and served as Joint Secretary, Ministry of Culture, with responsibility over Apex cultural institutions, libraries, archives, and museums, when it was my own privilege to have joined the museum sector and have received his unstinted support. Between January 2013 and May 2015, he also headed the National Museum in New Delhi as its Director General, and also as the Vice Chancellor, National Museum Institute of the History of Art, Conservation, and Museology. He exercised a transformative impact on that historic institution, initiating a range of projects that improved arrivals, enhanced visibility, and involved stakeholders and the academic community. He was invited to be a participant in the Global Museum Leaders Colloquium of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. In the tourism sector, Dr. Venu Vasudevan has a deep interest in community-based tourism, which resonates so much with the theme chosen for World Tourism Day this year. He organized the second International Conference on Responsible Tourism and was instrumental in establishing a robust model for responsible tourism in Kerala. He writes extensively on communities, responsible tourism, and the changing role of public sector in the tourism sector. And last but not the least, apart from his official responsibilities, he's a keen theater actor and an avid fan of Arsenal Football Club, which I guess will be a polarizing factor among the audience signing in tonight. Before Dr. Venu Vasudevan delivers today's talk, I have a few requests to make from this audience. Please keep yourself on mute because we need to make sure that any ambient noise coming from your end doesn't disturb or doesn't interfere with the live stream here on Zoom, and it is live streamed on Facebook as well. Please feel free to pose your questions to the chat box here, and at the end of the talk, Dr. Vasudevan would be glad to receive questions and answer them. So that's all for now. It's again a privilege and honor to have Dr. Venu Vasudevan, or Venu, a dear friend, to speak tonight on inclusive tourism in the one state in India which has the most dynamic sector and which has perhaps contributed most to the making of a responsible and inclusive model of tourism. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Venu Vasudevan to speak on tourism and inclusive growth. Thank you. Ben.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction, Jayanto. It's such a pleasure to reconnect with you. I've been following the work that you and your team has been doing at Victoria, which is an institution which is very close to my heart, having had the privilege of serving in the board. And also because you stand out because of the sheer body of work you and your colleagues have been putting out for people who love art and culture. It is not the best of times in our world of museums. There are several great institutions that could do so much better, but it is with singular happiness that I look forward to each of your new announcements. And today it is again my privilege to be part of that illustrious group of people who have delivered talks at the Victoria. So thank you very much for this great opportunity that you have given me. As has been brought out in that introduction, I have spent a good deal of my 31 years in the Indian Administrative Service, serving the sectors of tourism and culture, of which tourism would take the lion's share, both within the state and outside, but also the sector of culture, which I continue to serve as Additional Chief Secretary, looking after museums, archaeology, and archives, in addition to my responsibilities in tourism. I speak from a bit of experience, both at the local level, at the state level, and at the national level. And I also speak from experiences that have actually shaped the way I have seen tourism. I have been fortunate enough to be part of the evolution of Kerala, from a very fledgling small mention among the country's destinations to one of the most prominent destinations known nationally and internationally. And so through that journey, I think we officers who have been privileged to be part of that journey also have evolved, shaping our thoughts and perspectives and being guided by national and international case studies and experiences. That is the one part which I wish to share today with you. on this occasion of the World Tourism Day. So with your permission, I will move on to a brief presentation and will request Jayanto to do the honors for me. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme for today, this year's World Tourism Day, as given to the world by the United Nations World Tourism Organization, UNWTO, is tourism for inclusive growth. And this is inclusiveness is a word that works differently in different contexts. But in tourism, actually, it means several things. But I think the spotlight that has been put on one particular aspect of tourism is what the UNWTO wants us to look at this year. Next slide, please. Tourism for inclusive growth, according to the UNWTO, can I have the next slide, please? Is about looking at tourism in the context of the most unprecedented calamity, the most unprecedented damage that the sector has suffered in its history. No other problem, no other issue, no other event has impacted global tourism the way the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted it. The social, economic, and psychological impact that has been reverberating across the world in every sector has also hit the tourism sector very badly. You would imagine that tourism is one of the most fragile sectors in the world. The one that is hit the first and the one that recovers the last. Tourism is something that shuts down almost immediately in response to any shock, any kind of shock that affects it. So it has a massive economic impact, particularly on developing economies, because these are economies that are all the more vulnerable to such shocks. And among developing economies, the UNWTO points out that it is the marginalized groups and the most vulnerable who are hit the hardest, because they entire livelihoods depended on tourism, entire families, were depending on their sustenance on the sector, and these are the people who have suffered the most. So as the world slowly recovers from this massive blow that has befallen all of us, as the tourism sector struggles to get on its feet again, the World Tourism Organization reminds us that look beyond your statistics, look beyond the numbers about how we are growing, better. Our numbers are improving. We are recording more footfalls and arrivals. Look beyond these numbers, because beyond numbers, there is a person, there is a family. And shine the spotlight on that person, that family, that community, and make sure that in our process of recovery, we include such people, such communities in an endeavor to get back to our lives and get back into our livelihoods. This is all the more important because, as you know, tourism impacts on at least 3 of the Sustainable Development Goals, and these are all targets that are impacted very strongly by the pandemic. Next slide, please. So that brings me to this concept of sustainable tourism, which is a word very easily used by several people. Most of them use it in contexts which are probably partially true, but they do not really capture the entirety or the complexity of this term called sustainable tourism. Sustainable tourism is actually something that I would call it's an objective, but also a vision. It is like a beacon that we try to walk towards. And so sustainable tourism is tourism that takes account of the current and future, of economic, social, and environmental impacts, and that which addresses the needs of all those people, all those communities and groups that are involved in the tourism ecosystem, the visitor, the industry, the environment, and the community. Tourism that is ecologically sustainable, tourism that is economically viable, and most importantly, tourism that is ethically and socially equitable is what sustainable tourism aspires to be. Next slide, please. We talked about people and leaving, we talked about the importance of leaving no one behind. The cardinal principle here is that tourism without people is no industry. Tourism is, of all industries, of all sectors, a people-centric industry. It is not about people being employed, but it is the people in the center. It is an interconnected, dynamic industry, but all of which are run and propelled together forward by individuals. Tourism generates great contributions to a country or a destination, both in terms of economic development, but also in terms of cultural enhancement. And in terms of improvement, maintenance of environment. Tourism has the opportunity to be a great stimulator or a driving force that provides different kinds of income opportunities, different opportunities to generate revenue, different ways to provide employment. May I request?
Hello, please. Sorry. We request everybody to just put themselves on mute. There is some ambient noise coming from everywhere. So please double check your microphones and put yourselves on mute, please, so that the talk is not disrupted. Please.
As I was saying, tourism has developed into such a gigantic, such a comprehensive industry, contributing, it is the third highest contributor to the global GDP and represents and generates 1 in 10 jobs. More than 300 million people depend on tourism for their livelihoods, and 10% of the world GDP is calculated to be contributed by travel and tourism. Next, please. But even while we talk about this growth of tourism, this great expansion of the industry, providing multifarious opportunities and employment and contributing to economies, the one thing that is lost and has been studied in detail is that tourism can also become an extremely disruptive force, and an extremely dangerous one at that, providing impacts or danger to the local environment, creating issues of cultural issues that have deep-seated issues that have deep-seated implications for communities, and also providing great inequalities within society. And these have been thrown up in very stark fashion in several destinations, where it is very clearly seen that the benefits of tourism are cornered by a few national, global level players who corner the market and dictate terms and control how supply, control both the demand and the supply side, and leave the problems to be suffered by the vast majority, by destinations, by people who do not have a say in how tourism developed in their backyards and suffer the consequences of this big development that's happened in their region. And this has been studied quite a bit because in the 60s and 70s, or maybe a little later till the 80s, the mantra, particularly in developing countries like India, Southeast Asia, South Asian countries, was growth, 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 by trying to attract the dollar. We were extremely dependent on our foreign exchange remittances, foreign exchange earnings through tourism. So at all costs, tourism was to be developed. And I do not need to elaborate on the costs, on the problems, on the sufferings that have been cast upon several destinations and regions and even countries because of unregulated tourism development. And this led people in tourism to talk about these principles of equity and about fairness of use and about communities. Today, this has become so widespread, these discussions have become so widespread that the new narrative that is emerging across the world, particularly in the developed countries, that tourism has to have fairness in all its operations, in the distribution of goods, the distribution of benefits, both in terms of meeting the needs of the current generation, but also keeping in mind the requirements of future generation. These are important, particularly from an environment point of view, because of very unsustainable use of resources that tourism would often do in tourism development, would often bring into destinations which are intrinsically very fragile. So the United Nations agencies quite early flagged this as a very important point and as a point where the sector needs to change. We were talking about equity not only in terms of environment, but also equity in terms of how you deal with tourism stakeholders across the world. You had a Western bias. The rich Western customer could do anything. The customer was king, and this has again invited a big backlash. Today, the narrative which is gaining momentum is that the poor and the local community, particularly the poor in the local community, must get their fair share of the resources that are generated in order to sustain their own growth aspirations. And more importantly, perhaps, it is the community that should have the authority to take decisions which impact their lives and which can improve their common interest. These are important things that have emerged, and I think more or less agreed upon. The old model is discredited today. People are moving away from the classical models of tourism where you spend your 2 or 3 weeks indulging yourself in a destination where you do not connect to, in a region where you are alien to the people, and you really don't care about what you do with their environment. That is no longer the tourism that today's world, the contemporary world, thinks is justified. Next slide, please. So the global movement against conventional tourism has spawned several movements. One of the most popular one is ecotourism, as everyone is aware of ecotourism, which was about how to restrict movements and how to regulate tourism activities in protected areas and natural areas. Another movement was about rural tourism, where people were encouraged to move away from established destinations into lesser known places. But the one which I would like to talk about a bit is responsible tourism. And responsible tourism is an approach. I have briefly talked about economic, social, cultural, and environmental issues that are impacting tourism. So responsible tourism adopts what we call a triple bottom line approach: economic responsibility, socio-cultural responsibility, and environmental responsibility. And when we say responsibility, we mean responsibility cast upon all the players who are involved in tourism. And I'll come to that a bit later. Simply put, in the simplest, and I love this definition, tourism is, responsible tourism talks about better places for people to live in are better places for people to visit. So if you want to visit a place that is good in itself, you do not want to visit a place that has carved out an area, sanitize that area for you, and an enclave where you do not get bothered about the issues and the problems of the destination, and you have your own slice of paradise. We say that if people are happy and they're living in a good place, that's a good place to visit. That's a good place to holiday. And that's what responsible tourism indicates, that responsible tourism exhorts participants to aspire for. Next slide, please. Why responsible tourism? And this is a complex, the visual is not very enlightening, but I will merely pick up a few things from this. Basically, you put the people and the community in the center. And what are you saying? You're saying that the local community will provide you with experiences that will be unforgettable, that will be intimate, personalized, and will offer you an opportunity to participate in activities within the community. What will this do? This will foster local pride, because you're not putting on an act. The visitor and the visited, the tourist and the community member meet on equal terms. We talk about the benefits of that visit being shared by the stakeholders, including the community members. Responsible tourism talks about fostering culture, the pride in one's own culture, because such cultural artifacts, such cultural activities are promoted and bring a sense of local pride and happiness to the community. It's about fostering local enterprises, where the visitor is encouraged to move away from a resort, from a cloistered, secure environment, and venture out into the villages, where they partake in the activities of the community, eat the local cuisine, buy the local stuff, and thereby contribute in economic development of the region, of the community. It empowers women particularly, but because women are normally not in the regular workforce that is drafted in tourism resorts and hotels. Informal sector is a sector that benefits from responsible tourism activities. It also talks about local supply chains, where hotels and resorts are encouraged to purchase local produce and provide that to the visitor. So all these, if you look at all these are all connected very intricately to the local community. And the local community decides, they are the people who will decide what kind of tourism is welcome in the area and what kind of tourism is unwelcome. And that is what responsible tourism impresses upon when we talk about RT, we call it RT in destinations. Next, please. So with these principles in mind, I would like to talk about our experiences in Kerala. Now, as I mentioned, I've been in the sector for some time, starting in 1995. And in 1995, I remember there was this, I was given the task of acquiring land in a village in the very north of Kerala, which is called Bekal. And the task given to me was to acquire huge chunks of land on the beach side. Why was I doing it? Because the government of India had an expert consultant, which was tasked to discover, to identify new beach destinations in the country as a supplement to Goa. And so they did a fantastic job, but it's a very technical job they did. They looked at ocean currents, they looked at beach quality, they looked at sand quality, and they identified 6 or 7 regions, areas across the western and eastern coast of the country. And they said, these are ready, these are prime locations, set up your hotels here, and the people are going to swarm in. Remember the old model I was talking about? So this was classical. This was the model. This smacks of everything that is wrong about that model. You know, it did not talk about the people at all. It did not take a look at whether the people really wanted this kind of tourism. It encouraged enclave kind of tourism. And I was this young officer who was sent to this village called, this district called Kasaragod, armed with a master plan, which said that take over 1,500 acres or 2,000 acres or whatever. I spent 2 years there. I was garavod. My car was stoned. I had to escape at least 3 public meetings, through police escort. I discovered that I was unwelcome there. And I discovered through that journey, by talking to people, and after they were finished their rants, they would come and sit down with me and say, we really don't understand why you are here. We haven't asked for this. And now you're saying that hundreds of people have to be relocated because you want to build hotels here. And from there started my journey about people-centric tourism. And I'm happy to report that before I left Bekel, I had whittled down the whole idea into a project that acquired 200 acres, and we had to relocate 40 families. Each of these 40 families were given land, adjacent to wherever they were, whichever land they were removed from. And I had the full buy-in of the community because we invested in water supply schemes, we improved the roads there, and all these decisions were taken by the local governments, the local panchayats. And today there are 3 or 4 resorts that have already that are functioning from Bekel without any problem. But why do I say this? From this, it is a natural progression towards the responsible movement of Kerala. We launched Better Together, which what we call Better Together, was the state responsible tourism initiative in 2007. Now, mind you, 2007 was the time by which tourism had become big business in Kerala, right? And you had several resorts coming up, but again, what brought me back into trying to put a movement together was the issues we faced in Kumaragam. Now, everyone, I'm sure in this audience, knows the destination called Kumaragam. It is a backwater, on the sides of the backwaters and the Vembanad lake. You had a small village and a few resorts that come up, and these were very highly regarded and well written about. So you had a steady stream of visitors coming. But the people were totally alienated from these resorts. The resorts would just suck in people, give them a good time, and then send them back again. So while the water was being contaminated, while the regular traffic was creating problems in terms of atmospheric pollution, while their serene lives had been disrupted, the people of the community, the local community members, did not get any benefits. Local people were hardly, just a few people were employed in these hotels. Nothing was procured from the village. They got all their supplies from outside. So there was this huge antipathy towards tourism that was building up, and that culminated in a few strikes, in a few agitations that I knew are going to snowball. And Kerala is no stranger to agitations. So at that time, we sat together with the community members, and they said, look, if this doesn't help us, doesn't improve our lives, then we don't need it here. Let them go and take their resorts elsewhere. And from there, we started this discussion. And then we brought everybody together, established destinations, emerging destinations, the local community members, the local governments, the MLAs. We all sat together and we thought about how we can do this better. And in order to understand how others have surmounted this issue, we brought in practitioners from across the world who talked to us about their own incidents, their own experiences. So we had people from Africa, from South Africa, from the Gambia, where responsible tourism had been implemented. We had an expert, Dr. Harold Goodwin, from the UK, who anchored the whole thing along with me. And we had wonderful sessions that actually gave us valuable inputs on how we can take this forward. Now, mind you, responsible tourism or responsibility, exhibiting responsibility is not a new thing. There are several operators, tour operators, there are several hoteliers who have been doing exemplary work, also in Kerala, but certainly in other places where these people were sensitive to these issues. They were trying to do their best in terms of trying to provide employment and all that. But these were all activities that were taken up on an individual basis. Our goal was slightly more ambitious. We wanted to see whether destinations could be prepared and could work together. You know, the stakeholders in a destination could work together in order to move this responsible tourism idea forward. And that's how we brought this state level and destination level RT committees. And we chose to start this movement in 4 destinations. 3 of them were already established and 1 was, on its way. And we tried to implement this across all participating partners. Next, please. So in the first phase, which was our learning phase, really, we tried to put these models into practice. And what all we did, I will come to that in the next slide. But in 4 destinations, we tried this. In the second phase, we were emboldened by the benefits that we got, the results that we got, that we tried to move it into more destinations. And now Kerala has gone the whole hog. We have set up a responsible tourism mission that is central to almost most of our activities and destinations. And this mission has the mandate to take this idea across statewide and try to form a network that will create an environment across the state in all destinations, small or big, where responsible tourism is practiced. Next, please. So the responsible tourism mission today initiates community level activities in several destinations at the same time. It creates linkages and partnerships between the tourism trade on the one side and the community on the other. And it also encourages the adoption of the principles of responsible tourism and the practices of responsible tourism by all stakeholders. So it is a very comprehensive canvas that has been given to RT Mission, and it's a very complex task because it involves working with the poorest of the poor in the community. It involves working with women's groups. It involves working with tour operators and their representatives. It involves working with hoteliers, in order to overcome their biases and bring them across and to talk to each other across the table. And that is what the RT Mission has been doing over the years. Next, please. So just a few slides on the practices that we've been doing. And again, these run into hundreds of sessions, but the awareness programs are the first point where we begin, is talking about tourism, and involving the community members to talk about their perspectives about tourism and trying to remove, the bias, the prejudice that's in the minds of several people. At the grassroots level, we need to talk about tourism as an economic activity that is important for us, but that is not vital to our lives. So RT always maintains this. They say that if you remain utterly dependent on tourism, that is not a sustainable way to do it. And we are learning that this is a lesson that we've learned from several other destinations. We do not want a village to feel that if tourism stops, if tourists don't come to our village, then our life sort of ends there. So from there to the next point of so how do we connect with tourism? What are the things that we can do in order to derive benefits from tourism? What are the things that is expected of us? So these are the things that go into very comprehensive and very participatory awareness programs at the grassroots level. Next, please. The second and perhaps the most difficult area is about encouraging community members to start micro enterprises, which are directly or indirectly linked with tourism. Now, micro enterprises directly linked with tourism would be as simple as making sure that the total number of eggs, that is the daily consumption of eggs in a destination. Let us say there are 10 resorts in a destination. And so the RT coordinators, keep these records, to maintain the records, to understand what is the kind of consumption patterns that's happening. And if the eggs are being brought from, this is an aside, but till very recently, 60% of the eggs consumed by Kerala, and that's not tourism, I'm talking about everyday Kerala people, 60% came from Tamil Nadu. It doesn't make sense to me. I really can't wrap my head around it, but that's the fact. 60% or 70% of chicken, 60% of the eggs come from outside the state. There are several reasons to it. I won't go into it, but we try to address that as far as small destinations are concerned. We said that, okay, here is an opportunity for the community members to start these enterprises. How do you make sure that the egg requirement, the chicken requirement of this destination is fulfilled by the people here? So that would involve training them, providing them with loans, with the knowledge of starting these enterprises. Several other enterprises, any material that can be supplied to a hotel or a resort. Can we try to make it? So paper bags. Now paper bags have replaced plastic everywhere, and there is a huge number that is needed by enterprises, by tourism enterprises. So we try to encourage community groups, particularly women's groups, to identify a list of stuff, a list of activities that can turn productive for them and provide them a means of revenue by connecting with tourism. Next, please. Similarly, we have one of the most enduring and successful projects that the RT mission has rolled out across destinations is village visits and village life experiences. There is a slide on that later. But for that also, community level guides have to be trained. They do not have the language skills, but more importantly, they need to be told what kind of tours are possible. What are the things that a visitor expects from a guide, and what kind of behavior is acceptable and not. So such very painstaking projects, which involves detailing out tours, looking at each aspect, language training, are all done. Similarly, another very important aspect of RT activities is fostering cultural pride. We talk about every hotel and resort in an RT destination is encouraged to invite the local performers to come and perform, and that becomes a regular source of supplementary income for them. These are people who have other livelihoods, but they also have revived their old performances and arts, music and dance, and they perform for the visitor, even while they make sure that such arts are not lost and are passed on to the next generation. Next, please. I mentioned about practices about identifying objects and materials that are needed for hotels and other. The bag on the folder on the right side is ubiquitous now. In fact, today I was at a workshop and I was given a cloth folder. So these folders have become very important sources of revenue for several small groups, all of which have been trained by our RT coordinators. Next, please. The tour packages I was mentioning. We have hundreds of tour packages today, which provide an authentic experience of the village. So the visitor is encouraged to move out from the comfort zone, venture into the village, interact with the community members, understand the lifestyle and the practices of the villages. They also have storytelling programs. They have cycle tours, cuisine experiences. When local festivals are there, the community members take pride in taking their visitors along with them and telling them about the nuances of a local village festival. So these are all part of the overall experience that we encourage visitors to embark upon as part of the RT package. Next, please. Rides like these are never advertised. You will never see this kind of a photograph in a Kerala tourism advertisement. But a canoe, a local canoe, can take visitors into these hidden spots in the villages where perhaps the same canoe person would offer them or some local snacks from a local restaurant. So these are the kind of experiences that a visitor, would never have in a conventional tourist package that is offered by tour operators. Next, please. Visiting, a local marksman, for instance, in his house, and how he explains how, how he practices the ancient art which has been given to the ancient sport that he has inherited, and how he has a group of students from the next generation, which also where this tradition is passed on. Next, please. Cuisine is another important part of responsible tourism, because we believe that every village, every region would have their own tweak, their own speciality, their own secret recipe. And we encourage women, as I mentioned earlier, to open these small outlets where visitors are encouraged to come and eat, where each dish is explained to them. Perhaps they join the women in making these dishes. So this involves a lot of preparatory work, because we train women in hygiene, we train women in preparation, what is accepted, what is acceptable. And it's networked thousands of families today. So 2,800 families have been trained and were operating small outlets, providing direct and indirect job opportunities to over 6,000 people. The COVID pandemic put a stop to all that, but we hope that all these can be revived very quickly. Next, please. Environment is another important aspect. Instead of saying that, look, these people have spoiled the environment, we encourage the community to take ownership by saying that, look, it is your environment. You also need to chip in. We need to, together with the RT mission coordinators, the Vembanad Lake, areas of the Vembanad Lake has been cleaned, glass bottles. We have encouraged the total replacement of plastic, and several resorts today offer reusable glass bottles and steel tumblers in even high priced resorts. Plastic straws have been completely removed. Now, there are several other campaigns that we have started. I will not go into the details, but the point is that every stakeholder in the RT ecosystem is encouraged to take up a few practices that points towards environmental responsibility. Next, please. Hoteliers join in these efforts where the lake, large parts of the lake, which was polluted by visitors, by careless dumping, have been cleaned up. And this is a regular program where the hoteliers and the tour operators chip in with financial assistance, and the local community members are in the forefront of such initiatives. Next. The last part is the interesting one for me in terms of scaling, upscaling the whole thing. As I mentioned about several micro enterprises. Now, micro enterprises need not, limit their markets to the destinations where they are produced. So we have this network anchored by the Kerala Tourism website, which provides a platform, an electronic platform for products created by RT units to be sold, across a wider audience. And today that is gaining a lot of traction because it becomes not merely within the state, but also outside the state. There is a tie-up with these aggregators and the service providers, which ensure that these products are delivered in a contemporary and time-bound manner. Next. Similarly, the Art and Cultural Forum provides a platform for artists and cultural activists to provide opportunities for them outside their villages and outside their region. Hotels and resorts rotate the performances that are scheduled in during the season time, giving them larger opportunities and better options of providing a variety of performing arts to be presented in their hotels and resorts. The HR directory is a new initiative providing a directory of different kinds of skills available in the community and encouraging the established tourism industry to pick their required skill sets, their professionals from this directory, which provides employment opportunities also for the community members. Next, please. So I'll close here. I think the allotted time is just about up. The RT movement is not a project in the mind of the secretary or in a paper or on a master plan. 37 crores has been generated. We keep tabs of every rupee that's generated through RT. So no less than 37 crore rupees have been generated and distributed into the hands of the poor and the community members. 64,000 beneficiaries, are already in the network of responsible tourism. We believe that once Kerala gets back into full swing after the COVID-19 pandemic, these numbers will go up exponentially because they're all been trained, they're primed for business, and there is a lot of buy-in from our established tourism service providers like hoteliers, resort owners, and tour operators. So together, I think what the Kerala is presenting a model that is quite different from the development paradigm that tourism brings into most other states and most other destinations, where still you can find a great deal of inequality happening. 90% of Kerala's tourism infrastructure, hotels and resorts are locally owned. Only 10% are owned by these larger conglomerates. So this 90% is a clientele that quickly understands the necessity and the requirement and the imperative of being responsible in their practices. And together with a very, very aware community led by very able local community leaders and local governments, we have managed to create a network that we believe is durable, that we believe that responsible tourism is a practice that will inform all our work across all destinations in the state, and we believe will provide a model not only to the country, but also internationally. Next, please. Our efforts have been recognized internationally. We have been at the national level, also at the international level, several awards have been coming our way for the RT movement, which is a path not usually taken, but I think in the long run, I think the investments that we have made, both in terms of human labor and in terms of financial investments that we have made in fostering this and nurturing this initiative will pay us in the long run. And I believe that what we're doing is morally, ethically, culturally the right thing to do. Next, please. That brings me to the end of this presentation. Thank you for very patiently listening to our experiences from a small part of India. I'm very happy to take your questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Venu. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation, and you give us so much food for thought, as always, which is actually what we expect from Kerala, which is really a model in so many things. And you have encouraged us to think through many, many questions that Kerala is already grappling with. I encourage everybody to put their questions on the chat box. I couldn't place my questions in the chat box, so I will sort of abuse my privilege to just think aloud, just wonder aloud about a couple of points. I found it fascinating. As a student of history and social sciences, I am fascinated by this transformation of the very paradigm of tourism from the old style imperialist anthropology paradigm, in which we all talk about the imperial gaze and all that, where you are actually treating the village or the people as sort of an ethnic objects, as sort of smaller versions of a world exposition, from that kind of paradigm to the emergence and encouragement of a participatory kind of tourism. And I'm just fascinated by the combination of two things, whose combination is counterintuitive to me. One is the immense investment that you have made in the dissemination of awareness and also capacity building. So this is obviously you have completely deviated away from the top-down model and really involved the community. And it's a participatory model. But I'm fascinated by the example about eggs and chicken. We all are familiar with the expression that you count your eggs in the basket, but you have actually made the counting literally, and you have actually systematically, statistically surveyed consumption patterns and taken away lessons to it. So that's a fascinating example. I was just wondering whether that kind of statistics and data, we all hear about big data and data analytics, but you have done that for tourism, and I presume that you have many takeaways from those statistical surveys that you have used to upgrade, to sort of plug holes and improve in various things. So I'm just wondering if that model has been followed, or that kind of initiative has been emulated in any other states about data collection, statistical analysis about consumption pattern, and then trying to involve the community in the lesson that you learn. And so that was my first thought. The other question I was thinking of asking is that, as you said, 90% of these resorts are locally owned. Only 10% are sort of big brands, conglomerates. So is your experience and is the mission of responsible tourism in Kerala, does that, has that impacted, and has both those segments bought into that philosophy equally, or whether you have some other creases to iron out as well? So I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Jayanto. So the interesting thing about counting eggs is that it is actually it was Kumarakam that gave us this opportunity, because it was in Kumarakam that the economic part of responsibility, the economic responsibility was explored, in a destination level for the first time. And even today, I can say that it is in Kumarakam that the most durable kind of relationships in terms of economic relationships are still at play. In other places, not so comprehensively, not so much, but they're getting there. So I think in that environment, one of the things that was creating an obstacle was this whole demand supply business. The villagers would ask us, well, we always encourage them to put in a little bit of their money also, right? we needed them to take ownership. It should not be a dole coming from, RT mission or coming from the agriculture department or animal husbandry department. And so they said, well, who's going to buy from us? And the hotelier would ask us, well, how do we know hygiene standards? And, it's always better to get this from our regular dealer. And you are asking us to buy it locally and at a higher price, So these are the kind of conversations that happened there. And I think the first point we wanted to do was to have a very clear arrangement with the hoteliers. So we told them that, look, it's imperative for us to provide a supply chain for you. We need data, right? So, and they all chipped in, and it took some persuasion, but finally they chipped in, and in fact we had a small committee comprising of a purchase manager of a hotel and a few others who looked at this data and then transmitted that to the RT coordinator, because there is a lead time, of course. But over a couple of years, this sort of stabilized. But to answer your question, I do not think that this kind of work has taken place in any other state. You see, for the simple reason that for the first 2-3 years, we were not doing tourism. We were doing community work, right? We are connecting with people, encouraging people to start their enterprises, getting them back into cultivating fruits and vegetables. They had already abandoned. See, even a village like Kumarakam has access to vegetables coming from other states, right? So why would they want to go back into their homesteads and create, and cultivate vegetables? So all these had to be worked out, and that involved a lot of investment in time and effort in order to bring everybody together. So I think the other states need to sort of get into the philosophy of RT first, and then look at practicing it. It is the philosophical underpinning that I think has given us that durability, and that sustainability. What was the second part again? No, I think I've answered both your questions here. Your thoughts?
My second question was, you said you talked about a 90%, 10%.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I can't make a distinction in destinations where you had this kind of a buy-in. Even the bigger hotels, big brands. The Taj, for instance, in Kumarakam was one of the early adopters. They came in and said, we've taken a meeting. We know that it'll probably give us, hit us 15% in our purchase bills, but we are with you. So there is no distinction between them. And I think it's also a matter of, like I said, the RT mission doesn't work unilaterally. We try to work with every stakeholder and try to convert them into this philosophy first, and then bring them into the brass tacks. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there any? I see my colleague Raju Raman has joined. Is there any question on Facebook?
No, I don't see any question on Facebook.
Right.
And as it is, there are limited number of participants. So anybody wanting to ask a question can unmute.
Yes.
And perhaps ask a question. If anybody has any further questions, please unmute yourself and pose the question. But I don't think there are any questions, because Dr. Vasudevan's presentation has been so comprehensive and covering all aspects of inclusive tourism and more, that I'm sure people have a lot of food for thought, which they have to digest and sleep over and see how that can be also brought in as inputs at local level here also, because I think that is the future, and there is no escaping from this kind of a strategy if we want to keep tourism alive and want to protect so many other things simultaneously at the same time, including livelihoods.
Yes. I think I will, I'm just curious to ask Venu another question. And I think you can provide us with some insights. Now, you have straddled the world of, and you have, you have your feet firmly planted in the tourism sector, of course, but you have been such a critically important museum person, and you are still looking after museums. I have seen a bit of the museum sector. We have worked with India Tourism just a bit, but I have not seen the tourism sector up close. But from what you have laid down before us, the responsible tourism model, I'm struck by the difference between the kind of curation and the narrative that we still follow in the museum sector, in which the visitor, obviously now there are more experimentations in telling the story, letting the objects, speak their own stories about curation and all that. But we still don't have a participative model, a real interactive model of engagement with the museum collection. And what you are doing in tourism. So do you think that we need something like, we need to take our lessons from the tourism sector and try something of a different engagement in the museum sector at all? Should we do that in the museum sector? Is that doable at all in the museum sector? I'm just thinking about your experience and your thoughts on this.
Oh, you absolutely. I think it's going to hit us sooner rather than later in the museum, in the world of museums. I think the whole paternalistic, slightly condescending kind of approach that all of us, I mean, you and I, we are guilty of the same thing. Yeah, that this whole museum management, style is, I think that is on its last legs. Sooner, you see, the visitor today has a million opportunities, a million options. If you want to bring the visitor in, you better pay her the respect she deserves. So I think the important thing, and in very small ways in my museum, in my world of museums, we've tried to, we are trying to do it by saying that put the visitor first and engage with that visitor. Try to bring in the community as much as possible, because that's how stories are made. Instead of museums need to, sort of get themselves out of this this whole old mold of being a place where exotic objects, you can go to see exotic objects, to a place where stories, very interesting stories, connected to, as much connected to local, the local ethos and the local culture as possible, are woven and exchanged. So I can speak about a small museum that we've opened. Again, thanks to the pandemic, it hasn't really caught on, but it's a very interesting museum in Fort Kochi. We opened it, unfortunately, we opened it just when the pandemic was hitting us. So in Fort Kochi, we opened a museum celebrating the maritime, the connections that Fort Kochi has had with the colonial powers, and along with that, so that's something which is very much in the old classical mold. But along with that is a section which talks about the present Fort Kochi, and that is curated by Fort Kochi people. It's a living museum in the sense that people who are pictured there, and we've used technology, videos and all that, celebrates living people, people who are important part of their communities, and there are several communities there. Fort Kochi or Matanjeri, the neighboring precinct, is home to 35 communities of India and outside. So without that part, this museum will not fly. I'm positive. And while celebrating the communities, I think that that will bring in visitors and friends of their visitors, and the local community will have that pride about this is our museum. My grandmother is featured there, or there's a display of an old family heirloom, which we encourage people to bring in their heirlooms and exhibit that temporarily. So these are all projects that we want to do. We know that the community is ready to do it with us, but we haven't been able to do it because of the pandemic.
What a wonderful example. And we're pretty jealous. The models keep multiplying. You just added one more to it. So
there is a question that has popped up now on the chat. And the question is, sir, why are governments hesitant to penalize tourists who litter lakes and tourist sites like the Vembanad lake that you mentioned? Governments abroad would find the tourists, not so in India.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Banerjee, for that question. It is because we do not have the force to police the entire. These are vast stretches of our lakes, of our water bodies. So it is impossible to keep monitoring and policing these stretches. The sad part is that the littering doesn't happen because of visitors, visitors from abroad. Much of the litter happens because of our own brothers and sisters. So it's a matter of also being aware of your responsibility, and I think no amount of policing will get us to a point where we can control littering till the visitor himself or herself is aware that there is a responsibility cast upon the visitor to ensure that we adopt responsible practices while visiting a place.
Okay.
So we can wind up now, Jayanto?
No, there is one more here. They're slowly coming up with questions now. How to reconstruct the tourism after this COVID-19 pandemic?
So that's I wish I had a very ready answer to that. All of us. It is not easy. Tourism, even while tourism struggles to find its way back, we all know that post-pandemic tourism will be a different creature because people, our behavior has changed. Visitors' expectations have changed. Their purchasing patterns have changed. Their preferences in choosing destinations have changed. So it's a very dynamic world that is presented before us. And over the next couple of years, we'll learn more about this changed world. But one thing is safe to assume, and I've been saying this to my colleagues in the tourism sector, that we will depend more and more on tourism that's generated locally. So Keralites traveling within Kerala would be our first big market. South Indians traveling into Kerala would be another big market. Domestic tourism from outside, we have big markets in Gujarat and Maharashtra and Delhi probably would be our market. We will tend to see less and less of international tourism as we knew it before the pandemic. So that's probably the way to go. And probably it will take at least 3 years before international tourism, or whatever is left of it, returns to its original numbers, that India used to get. But it's a long road ahead.
Right. It is a pity, but it's indeed a fact that we will have to live with, certainly. Okay, Jayanto, then I think we can conclude this session.
Yes. Thank you so much, Venu. It's always such a great pleasure speaking with you, learning things from you, learning things from your insights, and you have given us so many tonight. I think I don't want to repeat ad nauseum that it has been such a fascinating talk. It has been indeed, but you have given us things to learn from about the whole question of responsibility and sort of making the community your own and sort of giving them a participatory role in defining their narratives, in shaping their futures. And that is the really the way to go. I mean, this is not really unique. It exists as a model before all of us, but the kind of things and the kind of investment that you have made in really living up to the ideal is exemplary. And like many other things that we try to learn from Kerala, I hope that this will be a model that we can learn from in the next few years. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you for having me.
Your insight.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, all of you who have joined in for your questions and for your support. Thank you. Thank you so much.